one and only John Travolta. I love you. Welcome back.
I love you too.
They love you. Come on.
Thank you so much. That was a gorgeous.
Oh my gosh.
I love this man and I love all of you.
Some endings do not arrive with a sudden crash or a dramatic curtain call. They settle in quietly, steady and unavoidable until you look around and realize everything has changed. John Travolta spent decades walking through a fire that would have broken almost anyone else, collecting incredible triumphs alongside unbearable, soul-crushing heartbreaks. Now, as the noise dies down and the spotlight fades, his trajectory has taken its final shape. The chapter is closing, and his story stands fully written, fate sealed in Hollywood's shadows. Look closely at the marquee of modern Hollywood, and you will notice a ghost wearing a leather jacket. He still shows up. He still signs the contracts, sits in the makeup chair, and delivers his lines when the director calls action. But the massive, globe-shaking cultural footprint that once belonged exclusively to John Travolta has quietly vanished into the twilight. There was a time when this man could single-handedly dictate what the entire world wore on Friday night, how they danced, how they talked, and what kind of cool they desperately wanted to project. Today, his project lineup consists of direct-to-video action thrillers, modest indie dramas, and quiet genre pieces that slip onto streaming platforms without making so much as a ripple on the cultural pond. This is not a story about a sudden fall from grace, nor is it about a bitter Hollywood exit. It is something far more subtle and infinitely more permanent. The simple reality of John Travolta's professional life today is that his ultimate destiny as an active A-list titan is finally sealed. The golden era of his box office dominance is officially behind him, locked away in the history books of pop culture. The industry moved on to capes, green screens, and algorithmic blockbusters, while Travolta gradually retreated into a quieter, more isolated corner of the business. He no longer chases the frantic rat race of studio politics, nor does he scramble to recapture the lightning in a bottle that made him a household name across 4 separate decades. His position in the Hollywood hierarchy has settled into its final unyielding groove. If you step back and look at the trajectory, the change is staggering. We are talking about a guy who used to command multi-million-dollar paychecks just to smile on camera. A guy whose dynamic presence on a movie poster guaranteed lineups around the block from London to Tokyo. Now, he operates in a world where his films bypass the big screen entirely. They pop up on demand, gather a brief wave of views from die-hard fans, and quietly disappear into the endless scroll of modern media. He is still working, of course, flying his planes, attending select industry events, and taking roles that intrigue him or offer a quick paycheck without requiring months of grueling press tours. But the ferocious ambition that drove a young kid from Englewood, New Jersey, to conquer the entertainment world has been replaced by a somber, pragmatic acceptance. There is a quiet dignity in this kind of fading out, but it comes with a heavy dose of irony. Hollywood is an industry notorious for chewing people up and spitting them out, yet Travolta managed to survive every single trap the business laid for him. He survived the brutal slumps, the terrible script choices, and the shifting tastes of fickle audiences. But time is the one adversary no actor can outrun, and the shifting dynamics of modern celebrity culture have permanently closed the door on the kind of superstardom he used to own. He belongs to a vanishing breed of true movie stars, the ones whose real-life persona was always bigger and more fascinating than any character they played on the silver screen. When that brand of star power stopped being the currency of the realm, Travolta's fate in the modern ecosystem was effectively locked in. He doesn't fight it anymore. You don't see him desperate for viral moments or scrambling for roles in massive franchise reboots. He has accepted the boundary lines drawn around his current career. He understands that the frantic, blinding white light of global megastardom is a young person's game, and he has already played that game better and longer than almost anyone else in history. So he stays in his lane, making his small-budget thrillers, living on his massive Florida aviation estate, and keeping the public at arm's length. The curtain hasn't dropped completely, but the main act is unquestionably over. The spotlight has dimmed down to a single steady beam, illuminating a veteran actor who knows exactly where he stands in the grand tapestry of show business. How did a kid from New Jersey become the biggest star on the planet, only to watch the world quietly move on? A different kind of sealed, heartbeat, and loss. To truly measure the depth of the shadow John Travolta walks through today, you have to look past the red carpets, the flashing cameras, and the shiny Hollywood awards. You have to look at the woman who stood directly by his side for nearly 3 full decades. When Kelly Preston died in July 2020, a massive piece of Travolta's world permanently broke. Their marriage wasn't just another flashy, short-lived show business arrangement that looked pretty on the cover of grocery store magazines. It was a genuine, fiercely protective, light-filled anchor that somehow held steady through some of the most chaotic storms a family could possibly endure in the public eye. Their story began back in 1987 on the set of a light-hearted comedy called The Experts. Kelly was still married to someone else at the time, but the instant spark between them was completely undeniable. She later admitted that seeing him for the first time felt like a bolt of lightning, famously recalling how she walked out of the room thinking she was looking at the man she was destined to spend her life with. By 1991, they had eloped in Paris, starting a journey together that would defy every single stereotype about high-profile celebrity marriages. For 29 years, they were utterly inseparable. While other celebrity couples were breaking up over press rumors and ego battles, John and Kelly built a quiet, impenetrable fortress around their home life, holding hands at premieres and constantly celebrating each other's achievements. She was his absolute rock during the moments when his career was falling apart, and she was his biggest cheerleader when he triumphantly stormed back to the top of the A-list. When the world loved him, she was there to keep him grounded. When the industry turned its back on him, she was there to remind him who he really was when the cameras stopped rolling. They danced together in living rooms, flew across the world in his airplanes, and weathered the kind of unimaginable personal heartbreaks that routinely rip ordinary couples apart. Together, they looked completely unshakable. Then came the quiet, devastating diagnosis that changed everything. For 2 long years, Kelly fought a private, terrifying battle with breast cancer. In an era where every single minor detail of a celebrity's life is instantly leaked to social media, they managed to keep her illness completely hidden from the public eye. There were no grand press releases, no tearful TV interviews, and no dramatic updates for the paparazzi to chew on. Instead, they retreated behind closed doors at their home, surrounded strictly by medical professionals and their closest family members. Travolta put his public life on pause, stepping completely out of the spotlight to act as her primary caregiver, protector, and husband during her absolute darkest hours. When she passed away at just 57 years old in the summer of 2020, the news hit the world like an unexpected freight train. Fans were stunned, but for Travolta, the loss was an absolute, soul-shattering catastrophe. He took to social media to break the news himself, posting a heartbreaking tribute that made one thing abundantly clear. He was stepping away from everything to be there for his kids. The energetic, quick-witted performer who had spent his life entertaining millions suddenly looked exhausted, weathered, and deeply, profoundly changed. The love of his life was gone, leaving behind an empty void that no amount of Hollywood success, money, or career reinvention could ever dream of filling. In the years following her death, Travolta has spoken with incredible candor about the raw, agonizing reality of grief. He described it as something deeply personal and isolated, a journey where other people's well-meaning condolences can sometimes feel like an overwhelming weight rather than a comfort. He realized that mourning is not something you simply process and move past on a fixed schedule. It is a massive, permanent shift in your internal reality. Kelly had been the bright, vibrant heartbeat of his household, the steadying force that held the family together when the entire world seemed to be spinning out of control. Without her, the silence inside his world became deafening. Yet, even in the middle of that unbearable darkness, Travolta chose to honor her memory not by giving up, but by standing tall for their surviving children. He poured his remaining energy directly into fatherhood, taking on the role of both mother and father, in a home that had been rocked to its core. Every public tribute he posts on her birthday or their wedding anniversary reflects a man who is still deeply in love with a memory, carrying her spirit forward in every single decision he makes. Her absence is a heavy, quiet presence that follows him wherever he goes, permanently altering how he views his remaining years on this earth. Yet, as brutal as losing Kelly was, it wasn't the first time death had torn through John's front door, in his arms twice. Long before grief laid siege to his later years, tragedy had already marked John Travolta, quietly stalking him at the precise moment his star was rising to the heavens. In 1976, while filming the made-for-television movie The Boy in the Plastic Bubble, a 22-year-old Travolta met Diana Hyland, an accomplished and talented actress 18 years his senior. The chemistry between them was instantaneous and magnetic, easily sweeping past societal expectations and age differences to bloom into a deep, life-altering romance. Travolta fell wildly and completely in love, finding in Hyland a mentor, a confidant, and an anchor who kept his rapidly expanding world grounded. But almost as quickly as the fairy tale began, it dissolved into a nightmare. Hyland was diagnosed with advanced breast cancer, and her health began to deteriorate rapidly at the exact moment Travolta was catapulted into cultural superstardom. As he prepared to step onto the set of Saturday Night Fever, the movie that would define an entire generation and change pop culture forever, Hyland was fading away in a Los Angeles hospital room. Travolta flew back to her side, holding her hand, whispering words of comfort, and holding her tight as she drew her very last breath in March 1977. She died in his arms at just 41 years old. Overwhelmed by agonizing sorrow, the young actor had to step back into the blinding lights of the movie set, channeling his raw heartbreak and unbearable loneliness directly into his performance. The emotional weight beneath Tony Manero's famous strut was not just an act. It was the bleeding soul of a young man who had just watched his first love slip through his fingers into the dark. Decades passed, and Travolta rebuilt his world, brick by brick. He married Kelly Preston, built a sprawling family, and welcomed his firstborn son, Jet, into the world in 1992. Jet was a bright, beautiful boy who faced severe health challenges early on. Diagnosed with Kawasaki disease as a toddler, an illness causing inflammation in blood vessels, and later revealed to be on the autism spectrum with a history of recurring seizures, Jet became the absolute center of the Travolta household. John adored his son fiercely, modifying his entire work schedule, buying sprawling properties with vast grounds, and flying private aircraft specifically to ensure Jet had a safe, comfortable, and peaceful environment in which to live and grow. Then came the dark days of January 2009. During a quiet family vacation at their home in the Bahamas, the unthinkable struck without warning. 16-year-old Jet suffered a massive, catastrophic seizure in the bathroom, striking his head against the bathtub and collapsing. Despite desperate attempts at resuscitation by first responders, medical staff, and Travolta himself, Jet passed away. The tragic news sent shockwaves around the entire globe, but inside the Travolta home, time simply stopped moving. To lose a parent or a partner is a harrowing passage of human life, but to bury your own child is an unnatural, soul-cleaving nightmare from which no parent ever truly recovers. In the immediate aftermath of Jet's death, Travolta retreated completely from public life. He admitted in later interviews that he did not know if he possessed the mental strength to survive the agonizing pain, openly questioning whether he even wanted to wake up in the morning. To make matters immeasurably worse, the vultures descended. A circus-like legal battle erupted in the Bahamas over an ugly extortion plot targeting the family during their moment of supreme vulnerability. The family was forced to relive the horror of their teenage son's final moments under a harsh, unrelenting global media spotlight while standing in a courtroom. Yet, somehow, through sheer willpower and the protective, united front of his marriage to Kelly, Travolta kept his footing and refused to fall completely apart. He didn't crumble into self-destruction. Instead, he poured his remaining strength into protecting his daughter, Ella Bleu, and eventually welcoming their youngest son, Benjamin, in late 2010. Benjamin's birth was described by John as nothing short of a miracle, a small, warm beam of sunlight piercing through a heavy, dark cloud that had hovered over their home for years. Raising Ella and Benjamin became his absolute life mission, the central pillar holding up his world through every subsequent trial. When Kelly passed away 10 years later, the heavy, daunting mantle of single parenthood fell entirely on his shoulders. He became the sole guardian of their memories and the single foundation under his children's feet, guiding Ella as she ventured into acting and music, and walking Benjamin through the bewildering loss of his mother. Travolta's relationship with his children today is not that of a distant, glamorous Hollywood patriarch living in an isolated mansion. It is an intense, fiercely loyal bond forged in the painful crucible of shared loss and survival. He regularly posts quiet glimpses of their life together, baking in the kitchen, traveling the world, playing piano, and celebrating quiet milestones on airport tarmacs. He has repeatedly stated that his primary job in life is no longer making blockbusters, chasing box office records, or pleasing industry executives. It is simply ensuring that his children feel safe, deeply loved, and completely supported as they navigate a world that has taken so much from them. Every smile he shares with Ella and Ben is a hard-won victory against total despair, a conscious choice to keep living, keep loving, and keep standing strong despite the crushing weight of everything he has lost along the way. Through all that noise and pain, how on earth did his career survive 3 separate decades of cultural reinvention? The wild roller coaster. To get how John Travolta became the quiet, singular survivor he is today, you have to examine the wild, dizzying roller coaster of his 5-decade career, a professional trajectory unlike anything else in the history of show business. Hollywood is filled with stars who enjoy a brief decade at the top before quietly sliding into oblivion, but Travolta refused to follow the standard script. Instead, his career played out like a series of extreme earthquakes, defined by unprecedented mega-stardom, icy box office slumps, and miraculous, world-stopping comebacks. He didn't just experience fame, he was swallowed whole by it, tossed aside by an unforgiving industry, and then miraculously resurrected at the exact moment everyone had written his professional obituary. It all ignited in the mid-70s with a cultural explosion that shifted the bedrock of global entertainment. Coming off his breakout role as the dim-witted, lovable Vinnie Barbarino on the hit television sitcom Welcome Back, Kotter, a 23-year-old Travolta, stepped into the light-up dance floor of 1977's Saturday Night Fever. Playing Tony Manero, a working-class Brooklyn kid who found his ultimate liberation under the disco lights, Travolta delivered a performance so magnetic, raw, and electric that it transformed him into an overnight global icon. He gave an entire generation its posture, its strut, and its music. A year later, he followed it up with 1978's Grease, playing the leather-clad, slick-haired Danny Zuko. Grease became an absolute juggernaut, cementing Travolta as arguably the biggest, most irresistible movie star on the planet Earth. He seemed completely untouchable, riding a wave of pop culture adoration that few actors in history have ever experienced. But in Hollywood, the higher you climb, the harder the pavement feels when the audience decides to walk away. As the 70s bled into the 80s, the magical touch that had turned everything he touched into gold suddenly vanished into thin air. A string of disastrous career choices, terrible script selections, and high-profile rejections began to dismantle his box office dominance piece by piece. He turned down lead roles in films like An Officer and a Gentleman and American Gigolo, roles that went on to make Richard Gere a superstar, and instead signed on to projects that crashed and burned at the box office. Critical failures like 1983's Two of a Kind, which failed to recapture the Grease magic with co-star Olivia Newton-John, and 1985's Perfect, an aerobics-themed flop alongside Jamie Lee Curtis, turned him into a punchline for late-night talk shows. The industry that had worshipped him just a few years earlier suddenly treated him like an artifact of a bygone decade. By the late 80s, the phones stopped ringing for serious roles. While he scored a massive commercial hit with the 1989 comedy Look Who's Talking, the credit went to the novelty of a talking baby voiced by Bruce Willis, rather than Travolta's standing as a dramatic leading man. He was relegated to light, forgettable fare, his glory days as a cultural tastemaker seemingly buried in the past. Then came 1994, and with it, one of the most astonishing career miracles in cinematic history. A young rising director named Quentin Tarantino, who had grown up idolizing Travolta's early work, insisted on casting the washed-up actor as Vincent Vega, a substance-addicted, ponytail-wearing hitman in Pulp Fiction. Studio executives fought the casting, desperate for a bigger current box office name, but Tarantino held his ground. When Pulp Fiction debuted at the Cannes Film Festival, it shattered expectations, redefined independent cinema, and launched Travolta directly back to the top of the Hollywood hierarchy. Watching him dance with Uma Thurman on screen was a moment of sheer cinematic lightning, a brilliant, self-aware nod to his past that reminded the entire world why they had fallen in love with him in the first place. The Pulp Fiction comeback wasn't just a minor blip. It ushered in a massive, decade-long second golden era for Travolta. Suddenly, he was the most sought-after actor in town, commanding $20 million paychecks and dominating the box office with a string of mega hits. He brought effortless charm to Get Shorty, delivered explosive action in Broken Arrow, brought heart to Phenomenon, and gave an unhinged, legendary performance alongside Nicolas Cage in 1997's sci-fi thriller Face/Off. For 10 brilliant years, he ruled the box office again, proving that his initial success was no fluke, but rather the result of a rare, undeniable talent that could transcend generations. Yet, the roller coaster had one more downward drop waiting in the wings. The turning point arrived in the year 2000 with Battlefield Earth, a passion project based on the novel by Scientology founder L. Ron Hubbard. The film was an absolute critical and financial catastrophe, widely mocked as one of the worst movies ever made. The wall of invincibility he had constructed after Pulp Fiction began to crumble once more. While he continued to land solid roles in hits like Swordfish and the 2007 musical Hairspray, the momentum of his second act slowly began to bleed out. Over the following decade, as Hollywood shifted away from star-driven movies toward massive, CGI-heavy superhero franchises, Travolta's brand of classic movie stardom lost its real estate on the big screen. He gradually transitioned into the world of lower-budget, direct-to-streaming thrillers, a quiet, predictable space where he could work on his own terms without the brutal pressure of opening weekend numbers. And as the years rolled on, it wasn't just his own youth slipping away. His inner circle started vanishing too, outliving everyone you ever loved. There is a unique, quiet kind of sorrow that comes with outliving the world that created you. For John Travolta, the passage of time hasn't just chipped away at his youth or reshuffled his spot on the movie studio call sheets. It has systematically dismantled the tight-knit circle of icons, co-stars, and soulmates who shared the stage with him when he was on top of the world. As the years have marched relentlessly forward, Travolta has found himself in the agonizing position of being a survivor, one of the last giants left standing from a legendary golden era of modern entertainment. Watching the culture move on is one thing, but watching the very people who helped you build that culture vanish one by one is an entirely different kind of heartbreak. The hits keep coming, each one striking a direct blow to the memories that define his life. In August 2022, the world mourned the loss of Dame Olivia Newton-John, who passed away after a long, courageous, 30-year journey with breast cancer. For millions of fans, she was Sandy Olsen, the sweet-voiced high school darling who stole Danny Zuko's heart in Grease. But for Travolta, she was infinitely more than a former co-star on a classic movie set. She was a lifelong sister, a trusted confidant, and a precious link to the exact moment his life changed forever. Their electric chemistry on screen was no accident. It was rooted in a deep, enduring personal affection that spanned over 4 decades. When news of her passing broke, Travolta's public message was immediate, deeply intimate, and painfully poetic. He penned a short, moving tribute, addressing her as his dearest Olivia, and declaring that she made all of their lives so much better. He signed it with a heartbreaking callback to the character that bound them together forever. Yours from the first moment I saw you and forever. "You're Danny. You're John." The statement echoed far beyond the standard Hollywood press release. It was the sound of a man watching another irreplaceable piece of his youth slip quietly into the history books, leaving him behind to carry the legacy of Rydell High all by himself. Just 4 short months later, lightning struck the same tree yet again. In December 2022, actress Kirstie Alley passed away unexpectedly from colon cancer at 71 years old. Alley had been Travolta's hilarious, magnetic, and fiercely loyal co-star in the smash hit Look Who's Talking franchise. Their off-screen bond was legendary, marked by a deep, playful, and genuine mutual adoration that lasted long after the film cameras stopped rolling. Alley had openly declared in numerous television interviews over the years that Travolta was the single greatest love of her life, the one who got away, and Travolta never missed an opportunity to praise her brilliant energy, wild spirit, and fierce loyalty. Losing Kirstie so soon after Olivia was a brutal double blow that seemed to cement the isolation of his later years. Once again, Travolta stepped up to deliver a quiet, dignified eulogy, sharing photos of them smiling together in their prime and writing, "Kirstie was one of the most special relationships I've ever had. I love you, Kirstie. I know we will see each other again." It was a stark, sobering moment for anyone who grew up watching his films. The energetic, light-footed dancer who once ruled the world with his friends was now standing in an increasingly empty room, surrounded by ghosts, memories, and the echoing applause of a past that can never be recaptured. So what is left for John Travolta now, as he navigates the remaining chapters of an extraordinary, tragic, and utterly unforgettable life? The answer isn't found in a flashy Hollywood comeback, a desperate push for a career renaissance, or a search for lost glory. It is found in the quiet, resilient strength he displays every single day as a father, a pilot, and a living legend. His fate isn't a tragic ending, nor is it a bitter story of defeat. His fate is simply the natural, unavoidable reality of a man who lived through the highest peaks of fame, paid for it with the deepest levels of personal loss, and somehow found the strength to keep walking forward through the smoke. He spends his time doing what brings him real, uncomplicated joy. He flies his beloved jet airplanes through clear blue skies, taking to the clouds where the noise of the world below cannot reach him. He mentors his daughter Ella as she steps bravely into her own artistic path, watches his young son Benjamin grow up, and cherishes the quiet, unscripted moments away from the flashing cameras. He no longer owes the film industry anything, nor does he have anything left to prove to the world. He gave us his youth, his energy, his tears, his dances, and his heart. He survived every storm, buried his greatest loves, and stood tall when the dust settled. The spotlight on his career may have permanently dimmed down to a quiet, steady glow, but the story of John Travolta is finally complete. A rich, sweeping masterpiece written in equal parts by incredible triumphs and unbreakable survival. Today, John Travolta lives a life far removed from the relentless pressure of the A-list rat race. At 72, he has anchored his world around 2 primary devotions: his children and his love for the skies. Living on his massive Florida aviation estate, complete with private runways for his fleet of jets, he spends his days flying, traveling, and hosting prestigious industry gatherings like the annual Living Legends of Aviation Awards. Rather than chasing blockbuster box office numbers, he works entirely on his own terms. He poured his heart into writing, directing, and starring in passion projects alongside his daughter Ella, while continuing to foster her blossoming music and acting career. His youngest son, Benjamin, remains his constant companion, sharing quiet family milestones away from the harsh global spotlight. Travolta has made peace with the passage of time. He stands as a rare Hollywood survivor who endured the absolute worst life could throw at him, coming out the other side with his dignity, his love, and his humanity entirely intact. If you enjoyed this deep dive, don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories behind Hollywood's biggest legends.